So, although it's under difficult circumstances in which I find myself chairing this meeting this evening, it's essential that the Council continues to deliver vital services for our residents. And as we know, Cabinet is essential to doing this. I will speak more on the resignation at full council on Wednesday, but tonight, as we have a full agenda, we must focus on the business at hand. This administration's priority has always been delivering for our residents, and that is what we will continue to do. So I just want to advise you that the meeting will be live streamed today. So, that started. Thank you. Okay. So, and just to inform elected councillors, if you are joining online, you can indicate to speak, but your attendance will not show as you attending the meeting in person. Okay. So I just want to, in the meeting, highlight some changes to Cabinet that I had to make temporarily to support me in this role. Councillor Chapman will be leading on overall property and capital programmes, Councillor Kennedy, VCSE property, ICT, Councillor Chapman, Woodbury Down regeneration and the London Legacy Development, Councillor Nicholson, myself, relationships with London councils, the Local Government Association and internal partners. Councillor Kennedy will do public affairs and campaigning, Councillor Woodley, Young Hackney, legal and democratic services, Councillor Chapman and Councillor Nicholson, ethics and governance. And I just want to thank all my Cabinet colleagues for their assistance in this adjustment period to enable me to do not just my current role electing in the powers of the Mayor, but obviously having to carry my portfolio too, and I extend all of that to Cabinet members, irrespective to an appointment to their portfolio as that is. I've received apologies from Councillor Maima and Councillor Ette and Councillor Coburn are joining online. Do we have any other apologies for absence? Okay. Do members have any declarations of interest? I've not heard any urgent business brought to my attention. So we go on to item 4. So notice of intention to conduct business in private. So there's an exempt appendices on item 13. So we will deal with that later on in the evening if Cabinet wishes to discuss that. So item 5 on the agenda is questions and deputations. I've not received any deputations and questions regarding the schools estate. We'll take that under agenda item 8. So item 6 on the agenda to agree the minutes of the previous meeting of Cabinet. Do Cabinet have any comments or questions on the unrestricted minutes of the previous meeting of Cabinet held on the 24th of July? No? Can we approve the minutes, colleagues? Thank you. Item 7, unrestricted minutes of the previous meeting of the Cabinet Procurement and Insourcing Committee. Can I invite Councillor Chapman to share some observations for that meeting?
Thank you, Chair. It's before Cabinet or no, essentially. But I just draw your attention briefly to 3 main things on the agenda. And social care transformation project, we've let the contract so that important work will go out over the next 3 years, bringing the modernisation of the way we and also the contract both for the benefit of our residents and care users and the government. We also let the care support contracts advisory performed to the house, and we're going to report your attention particularly to the drug alcohol contract, which is really important contract to do that. Leading national voluntary improvisation.
Thank you. Councillor Chapman. Can colleagues note the minutes of that meeting? Thank you. So we go on to item 8 on the agenda, which is schools estate strategy. I want to introduce this item by thanking everyone who's come this evening or who has participated in the course of this consultation. Colleagues as well, I know that you've spoken to parents, carers and people within the community. And tonight we're going to discuss the proposals that is put before us in this agenda item. And I really, again, want to thank everyone who's taken part in the process so far and the officers that have led on this piece of work. As a former school leader, I understand how challenging this is. In all the time that I was in education, I never thought that I would have to be having a discussion, leading a discussion on potentially merging and closing schools, nor the officers actually. I think there was only one officer in the council, I think that was Jo, that said that she'd been through a period of overseeing the closure of school. But even in the officer group, no one has been in this position, nor is it what anyone wants to do. I understand and admire the strength of feeling, the commitments to your schools and your environment. And I know that for so many of you, a school is not just somewhere where children go to get educated. It's the heartbeat of your community. It's where you come together. It's where you build those families. It's where your children make those connections. It's when you look back in your memories and you have those impressionable moments and times, your school is often the place that you engulf some of those memories. So I understand how hard that is. It's really important for me to stress again that no school is here by any fault of their own. 97% of Hackney schools are good or outstanding. These are fantastic schools, and over the last decade we've been on a phenomenal journey, and for that is something that we are all proud. It's just unfortunate that there are drivers outside of our control that means we don't have enough children to fill the school places that schools need to be able to survive. I want to reiterate that the prospect of amalgamation or closure of any schools is not something that any of us politically or officers take lightly. It's taken us a long time to get here, and while we still search for alternatives, we are here because all of the measures that we've put into place to date have not, unfortunately, been able to increase uptake on school numbers or fill those empty vacancies. We are proud of our schools, as I've said, and they have achieved phenomenal outcomes for our children and young people, but not just the academic results. Yes, we are above the national average again, whether it's the GCSEs or A-levels or in our primary schools, yes, but it's those extracurricular activities, it's those things that we do outside of those core teaching hours that I think are fundamental to what makes Hackney education great. But those are the things that are now at risk with our schools when they don't have their full numbers. All of those extracurricular activities, the money for those interventions, the money for those school trips, those enrichment activities, to fix the school buildings and to pay for staff. When there isn't enough money in the schools, these are the things that makes it more challenging, and the very thing that we all love, campaign, champion and fight for then is at risk because schools cannot run and function in the way that we want them to. I know that our schools have done a phenomenal job through the pandemic, but so many things means that our schools are here. One of the biggest things is the fall in birth rate. In London, there has been a significant drop in the birth rate, and the General London Assembly figures show that actually up until 2028, there will be a decline. So you've got lower birth rate, Brexit where families have gone back to Europe, the cost of living crisis, the cap on benefits, so housing, so where the government paid more money for people's housing benefits, they've capped that. So many people have had to move out. I would say COVID to a degree where people were travelling more into London, having their children going to London schools and travelling back and forth. I think in the pandemic where people are working online now, there isn't so much of a feel for that. So we find ourselves in a difficult situation. I wrote to the Secretary of State some months ago and wrote to her again, because basically while we wrote to the government and they gave some funding, the funding that they offered doesn't even cover one of the schools' deficit that's in scope. So that's the reality of it. And I've gone back to write to them again in the hope that they will do more. But in the absence of them not doing more, we cannot be irresponsible and do nothing. And it's difficult. And it may even make us very unpopular, but it's because we care about all of our schools and every individual school, we are in this situation. So I'm gonna pause there. And I think I've got some people here that would like to ask some questions. Is it Hazel? No? Oh, I've got Hazel. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Yes. Can I take Miller? Can I take you first?
Okay. So my question is, are cabinet members aware that Hackney Council have been served with a pre-action notice by an eminent public law QC representing Colveston parents?
Sorry, can I just ask you to maybe come back from your mic just a little bit, because I'm finding it really hard to hear what you are saying.
Okay. Is
Thank
it better
you.
now?
That's much better. Thank you.
Okay, shall I start again? Okay, are cabinet members aware that Hackney Council have been served with a pre-action notice by an eminent public law QC representing Colveston parents that challenges the legality of the consultation on multiple substantiated grounds, and that to advance proposals to close Colveston will likely see the whole consultation challenged at judicial review? Note that the council response is due today, but has not yet, as of 3 p.m., been received.
So I'm just going to recap. You're talking about, do you want members to know if we knew that if we'd received the pre-action notification? So yes, we are aware of that, and officers have taken note of the issues that you raised in that pre-action notification. And there was a delay in the report to make sure all of the concerns that you had raised had been looked at.
Yeah, can I ask a follow-up question? Well, in light of this, should the council not consider restructuring the proposal in a way that each school is reviewed and consulted with separately?
Sorry, I don't know if it's your mic or mine, but I'm having trouble hearing you.
Okay.
Sorry, is it just me or can everyone hear clearly?
Okay. In light of this, should the council not consider restructuring the proposal in a way that each school is reviewed and consulted with separately, lawfully, and with due consideration for their specific circumstances and the changing landscape of Hackney's provision, with protections provided for schools in frame?
I'm going to recap. I think you were saying, in light of the pre-application, do we think that every school should be considered separately? Was that the gist of it? So,
And lawfully.
and lawfully. So in terms of lawfully, the council has a legal and governance service, and they have looked at the report and they have done due diligence. So as elected members, when we get reports, we can ask questions of officers of course, and have those questions ratified. But if our legal counsel has looked at the report and has reassured us that actually what we're doing is lawful, we have to take that into consideration. There was nothing in the application notification that would instigate that we would have to take every school on an individual basis. But the report did reflect some of the things that you mentioned, and we did delay in producing the report just to do that due diligence. So it's not that we're not listening, but nothing came to mind that would indicate that we needed to take every school systemically.
Thank you. My question, the new school leadership inherited a deficit and achieved budget surplus in their first 2 years. Why is the council ignoring the identification in the independent SMRA report it signed off unchallenged of hundreds of thousands of pounds of further savings on top of the small deficits modelled in the Conservative budgets produced by the school and already outperformed in year one?
I can ask you to repeat that. It was quite a long question.
Fine.
I don't know if you're laughing at me, but maybe I should share with you that I have dyslexia, so it's a processing thing.
Okay.
Yeah. So let
We're certainly not laughing at you.
as I said, some people were laughing. I'm not saying it was that, but I thought maybe I should ask you why I've asked you to repeat the question. It's a processing.
It was purely
It's a
because
processing-
we've
it's a
done our
processing
best
thing.
to
I heard the
compress them.
SRA, which is the around the resources assessment. So if you just repeat the question again, so I can get some of that down, so I can answer in full.
Yes, apologies. The new school leadership inherited a deficit and achieved budget surplus in their first 2 years. Why is the council ignoring the identification in the independent SMRA report it signed off on unchallenged of hundreds of thousands of pounds in further savings on top of the small deficits modelled in Conservative budgets produced by the school and already outperformed in year one?
So my understanding on the reading of the report is that the report didn't suggest that. The report actually agreed with the local authority on that. So I think we'll have to disagree on that basis. And I know that while I think we've had this discussion before, although the school has made some phenomenal recoveries. I mean, the federation that you're working with has done a fantastic job. You know, I'm always singing Blossom's praises. But remember, that was in the caveat of the council still having to invest £50,000 back into the budget to give it that boost. So while you did make some recovery, you still needed that financial support from the local authority in order to boost the recovery to make the direction of travel that was needed.
And my follow-up question. The report quotes the SMRA that running down the debt in 3 to 4 years would be extremely challenging, and I quote. However, the same report states that running in-year surpluses is highly achievable. What is the financial logic of writing off the debt rather than allowing the school to pay it down over time?
Because if you write off the debt, that is once and for all, and then that debt doesn't then continue to increase. But if you look at, I think it's 4.22, what the report was saying is that the model was not sustainable. So over time, even though some headway might have been made, over time it wasn't sustainable to be able to make the recovery that the school would need to be sustainable over time.
That's not how it was.
I'm afraid we disagree on that.
And we're going to disagree. You know, we're going to disagree. If I get something wrong, I'll put my hands up and apologise. If I come back and I realise anything that I say was wrong, I'll happy to apologise on public record. I can only go with the evidence in front of me that I've asked officers about, tasked them about, had hours of conversations with them. Even today, I've met with this officer. They'll be too polite to say the difficulties that we challenge them with. You know, we haven't come here very easily. It's been a long, robust, very vigorous piece of work that has brought us to this point. We haven't taken it lightly.
Are we allowed to come back to
Thank
that point or not?
I think you already had one follow-up question. So,
I think
I-
this is.
okay. So I think, Mike, you're going to answer Tara's question. Is that right?
Yes, she
Thank you.
apologizes for not being here. My question, rather than protecting local authority education, is this policy not one devised by Hackney Labour that will drive flight of pupils and staff into provision considered more protected from closure to private, free and academy provision or out of the borough, as has been the case with the Beauvoir?
Basically, you're asking me, do I think this is driving people into private education? Is the gist of your point? Or am I misunderstanding you?
That it is the way in which the consultation has been conducted is significantly damaging to the local authority brand, and it will see flight of staff and pupils away from those schools.
I think, I mean, it's an interesting concept, and I think if the local authority was choosing to do this, one could argue and maybe debate that. But given we are here because it's no fault of the school and no fault of the authority, I find it hard to believe that you saying us doing this, we're driving people into private schools. Now, inevitably, because the school system is unstable, parents are going to make different choices, and parental choice remains to be key. If parents that go to maintain schools then consider to privately educate their schools, I have no influence over that. I hope they don't. I hope they don't. I hope they stay in I hope they stay in maintained schools. But
Yeah, I was referring to free schools and academies.
oh, free schools and yeah. Look, we don't have, and we've had this discussion before. In that we've had this frustration discussion before. Unfortunately, we don't have the powers over free schools and academies in the same ways that we have maintained schools. And previously, I have written to government to ask for those powers so that we can bring all schools into scope. Now, officers do work with all the schools in the system if they so choose to wish to work with us, but we cannot mandate all schools to do that, and that is quite frustrating. I wish we could just get all schools in the system, I shouldn't say system, no, parents don't and carers don't talk about the word system. I wish we could get all of our family of schools to work together and we decide what schools maybe should merge or which schools maybe in scope. We don't have that power. We can only do that with maintained schools. So we're restricted to the decisions that we made. But I have called on government for those powers. But in the absence of those powers, we still have to act. If we do nothing, all the schools will be put under tremendous strain, and ultimately that will be quite destructive. At least if we do try and do something pragmatic, we're looking at things to see if we can do something in a measured way for children and young people.
Then I'll ask my follow-up question, if
Yes.
I may. In the knowledge that the council has already prepared a list of 16 schools for its next consultation, why would any Hackney school with vacant places over 10% or that has recently run an in-year deficit not start aggressively searching for a free school mat at this point?
I think it goes back to what I was saying before. Every school leader has a choice to make. I will always encourage our schools to be maintained, but every head teacher has a choice to make, and they will make it. I will always encourage our families of schools. The majority of our secondary schools are academies, as we know, but the majority of our primary schools, remember, are maintained schools. It's a strong system. Unfortunately, because we can't control the birth rate and what we need is more children, that falls without our control of influence. You know, all of the times when we've worked hard to ensure, whether it's been political will, political investment. So in Hackney Education, we invest a lot of money over what is statutorily required because politically we agree with that. We as elected members are committed, officers are committed. Those things within our control, we're absolutely doing the most we can. The thing about the school roll numbers is that the drivers are things that we're not able to influence. So that's why we're here, having to embark on difficult positions. You know, this year, Hackney will have lost £30 million because of untaken school places of children not in education. And not because they're not in education, as in they're not going to school, there are just not enough children. So we've gone from a 5% healthy balance. So if every school has on a whole, if we have 5% of empty vacant places, what the Greater London Assembly, the GLA, said that's healthy. Hackney has 22%. So it's a really huge figure to be able to carry that deficit in terms of providing quality education. I go back to what I said before. Everything that you love and aspire to for begins to be undermined if we don't think about the steps we take in the future. No, I'm sorry. No, listen, can I just say, I don't have to take questions. We were here last time and for an hour, I took question after question after question. I've had meetings, officers have had meetings, we've gone to the school, Councillor Woodley and I have been there. So it's really important that we have an orderly meeting. So it's one question, it's one follow-up, and I don't think I'm being unreasonable to say that as chair. Yeah, it's difficult for all of us, I know, and I get you're frustrated. I get that. No one wants to be here. We're all trying to do our best. Rick.
Hi. By failing, as stated in the report, to consult at a formative stage of proposals, the consultation has been framed in such a way that no alternatives to the proposals could arise from it. Why is Hackney Labour proceeding in a manner that is both undemocratic and liable to legal challenge?
So, I don't think that officers have presented anything before members that isn't eligible to be considered before us. You know, but as I said, if we've done anything wrong, I'm sure we'll come back and apologise. Our legal and governance team have gone through the report, have gone through your suggestions and everything that you've handed to us, and it has been looked at and considered. You're saying, why is Hackney Labour doing this? Let's be clear, Hackney Labour has no control over the drop in birth rate. Hackney Labour has no control over the cost of living crisis. Hackney Labour has no control after the Conservative government who capped rent. That meant lots of our residents who used to live in Hackney can no longer afford to be here. Hackney Labour has no control over the housing crisis, that people can't afford to live in London and take flight and move outside of the borough. What we do have control over and responsibility for is when our schools are in difficult situation, is to consider everything put before us, even if those things are difficult and even if those things make us unpopular. So it's not a case of Hackney Labour wanting to consider evidence that is not lawful or having a narrow framework. We're in a difficult situation and we are doing our best to make the right decisions for all of our schools, to make sure we don't just leave schools where, like in Lambeth, where parents were given 3 months to say, find a new school. We don't want to be in that situation. We hope we're not in that situation.
So, as follow-up, if hundreds of responses were received to the consultation from a range of stakeholders and expert testimony, with 90% respondents against in the case of Calverstone, why have all these arguments been dismissed and the council still unable to identify the purpose of the consultation? What was the point of the consultation?
So, you know, that's a good question, but we could have just gone out. So again, I'll just wait for the laughing and the giggling.
It's a question we've been waiting for the answer to for a long time.
Yeah. And I'll do that, but if, you know, if there's noise, I'm just gonna wait. So the thing about it, the purpose of the consultation was to hear the views of the parents. We could have gone out with the shortest period of time, just done a statutory consultation and nothing before. We decided not to do that. We decided to go out to every school so that parents and carers could hear from us as elected members and officers from the first time, this is what we're considering. So we took a longer process. Now, in hindsight, one can reflect and say, well, should we just gone out to statutory notice? I still don't think that was the right approach. I think to have those early conversations, have those difficult conversations, so that even before we get to this decision process, people have had the dialogue, people have had the opportunity to raise things, people have been given the opportunity to suggest alternatives that we've been willing to consider. So the point of the consultation is to have that dialogue with parents to hear their views. Hannah.
Thank you. With Hackney Education already engaging in discussions with free schools about potential use of some of its best school sites on long
Hannah, can you use your mic, please?
Can you not hear like this?
Someone is.
Okay. With Hackney Education already engaging in discussions with free schools about the potential use of some of its best school sites on long leases at peppercorn rents, isn't Hackney Labour actively promoting an increased share of the for-profit education sector in Hackney against its stated policy aims?
So if you have evidence of anyone on the council engaging with free schools, I'd like to know what those conversations have been. My understanding is that officers, and especially us as not elected members, have not been engaging with any free schools discussing any buildings. So, or have I misunderstood you?
So that's some of the understanding that we have, is that those discussions have started. But then to build on that, in
So,
case of,
Hannah,
yeah,
where's the evidence of that? Because I'm telling you that, to the extent of my knowledge, hasn't happened. So if you have evidence that supports differently, I will go away and have those conversations, because I'm not having those conversations.
okay.
And to the extent of my knowledge, when I'm talking to officers, they're not having those conversations. So if you're saying something different, I would like evidence of that.
Okay. And I think we can email about that. And in
Thank
the case
you.
of Culverston, where we believe that there's an educational use covenant on the building, why is Hackney Labour pursuing a strategy that will directly lead to the opening of a free school if Culverston is closed, as was the case with the Hackney Downs School, apparently?
So thank you, Hannah. Hackney Labour is not deliberately trying to do anything to undermine a maintained school. I think that's really, really clear. And every time that you say that, I'm also going to say that. We are not doing this because we want to. We are not here having to consider difficult situations because we haven't tried other alternatives. We are in a difficult situation. So this isn't something deliberate that Hackney Labour has sat down and conspired to do. We're looking at the data, we're looking at the evidence, we're looking at school leaders that need to pay the bills in schools and looking at how challenged that is, and we're trying to make the right decisions to make sure that those schools are not put under any more pressure than they are at the time that they are now. Question.
Yeah, it was about Culverston specifically, the follow-up question.
Yeah, so that applies to Culverston. That we're not doing anything deliberate to Culverston. Culverston is in scope because of the situation around the roll numbers, just like all of the other schools are in scope. So I'm not sure if I'm not answering your question specifically. If you just reiterate, what is it?
I think what I'm finding challenging about this process is once we've asked our follow-up in these moments, then there's very little space for seeking clarification. So apologies if sometimes you find that the laughter is difficult. I think it comes from a very tricky position of not feeling like we can express ourselves further when we're not getting the answers that we need.
On board, Hannah, but you know, we've always been open to dialogue. As I said, we've met, we've spoken, and we'll continue. Well, not you individually, but I have met with
Yes.
Colveston parents, Hannah. And the report talks about, you know, right, let's have Chris.
Sharing microphones, but this might help because I won't be so close to it, so you might better hear me. Is that okay? Why does the council still fail to kind of address the specific long-term impact of the Dalston plan and the 21st Century Street on the future demand for places at Colston Primary, given that just 20 pupils from 600 new flats, which are being kind of built nearby, 200 of which are 3-bedroom family units. That would add, £130,000 per annum to the school budget. The school street makes the unique Colston opportunity, something that could be very attractive for Dalston going forward into the future, and would affect the kind of the long-term abilities of the school. Why is the future never kind of seen? It's just purely kind of old numbers and look into the sort of the past.
So thank you for your question. I mean, it would be very sad if the school had to close, if that decision was made, but that decision is not for the decision tonight. It would be sad, but the 21st Century Street wasn't just about the school. The school was part of it, and you would hope a school would be there to benefit from that. You mentioned the Dalston plan, and officers and we've looked at the Dalston plan, and you're right, there are flats. You mentioned lots of flats coming into the area, but the projection of the evidence shows that even if those flats were filled, it still wouldn't bring enough children into the area at the right age at the time that you need them, because you need those children in your schools now, at the very least, to be signing up in September. If some of them are toddlers, if some of them are babies, it doesn't really work. It's school-age children ready to take up those places. And then, the sizing of the housing as well. So what officers will be doing is we're looking at the size of the accommodation. So are they going to be single occupancy, how many bedrooms there are, and they use that to project how many potential families are moving in. But even with those projections, enough children will not be moving into the area. But as I also said, in the time that you need them in the area to be able to fill up those places to make the school sustainable.
Great, and that is our kind of long-term sustainability. In the short term, schools like de Beauvoir, there are other opportunities for children to come to Colveston right here, right now.
So what did you mention about de Beauvoir?
Oh, it's not de Beauvoir, is it de Beauvoir? Yeah, de Beauvoir.
Are you saying that de Beauvoir can come to your school?
The short-term solutions you talk about of those different age ranges, that can be.
So if you had that conversation with de Beauvoir, you know that. Are you saying de Beauvoir can come to your school? I'm just making sure that I'm hearing you correctly.
I'm saying there are other opportunities.
No.
In the short term,
But is your short-term solution for de Beauvoir to come to Colveston? Is that what you're saying?
Well, surely it's
and have you had that conversation with de Beauvoir?
I'm not sure it's our
parents
role to
and
do the consultation for you.
Okay.
We'd love you to have that conversation.
I just think that, well, I'll get back to you on that. Well, what I would say, why I asked you is that I know for us as an organisation, no parents from de Beauvoir have expressed any view to come to Colveston. So that's why I'm asking you if you've heard something different, because parents haven't expressed that to us. Yeah. So that's why.
In what format?
No. That's another follow-up question. I'm telling you that parents have not expressed to come to your school. It's inappropriate for you to ask in what form. That is for. You can shake your head. That is for de Beauvoir parents. No. That is for de Beauvoir parents to know and to express and to inform, and that's okay. I've told you what we've been informed. That's why I asked you specifically if you'd heard anything different. Because if you as parents have been talking and that mood has changed, obviously that gives us license to go out and have a different conversation. What I'm saying to you, that parents and carers from De Beauvoir School have not expressed to come to the school.
Have you asked them that
Yeah,
question?
yeah, I'm not taking any follow-up questions. Okay,
Okay, so Dorothy.
Dorothy.
I have an email about it, but I'll ask it here as well.
Thank you.
Okay, so, sorry. So the HIP group of parents of autistics in Hackney, which I consulted with when we received our very short sort of notice to find a school for our SEND kids, basically report that most local schools have a devastating SEND provision. Colveston offers a great SEND provision. Why do you insist on removing kids from Colveston when that would mean a reduction in quality of provision for pupils of protected characteristics? Like, I honestly have not found a school that would take my son. The schools that have come up with good reports, like Queensbridge, there's 2 schools that have come back with good reports, but most of the schools, most of the parents are like, stay away from Gayhurst, stay away from Nightingale. Everybody said to me, stay away, stay away, stay away. The only one school that came back and said, go to this school is Queensbridge and London Fields. And both those schools, I looked them up, they don't have places for our kids. So you will actually be reducing the provision. Sorry, that was a very long question, but why do you insist on reducing the provision for our kids, for our SEND kids?
Councillor Woodley, do you want to come in and then I'll come in after?
Thank you, Chair. Dorothy, I really feel your emotion. I said when we came out to all the schools, and every school felt the same, not just Colveston, the absolute anxiety about the disruption and the love and care that they had for their school. We had parents, children even, some of them there as translators, supporting their parents, crying at the idea of losing their school and declaring their absolute, trust and affection for their head teachers who perhaps helped them through the pandemic, for their staff, for their SENCOs in particular. This is like a really, really difficult situation. I do have to say though.
Sorry, who is that? Who is that that's coming to you with these?
I've gone to all the schools that are subject to closure and amalgamation. I've listened very carefully to all the head teachers and all the parents and all those rooms, and it's been extremely emotional. This is like an awful situation. Absolutely no one denies that. One thing I do have to say though, is that the idea that we are now in a forum where we can criticise some of the schools when they are all rated good or outstanding, I find really just uncomfortable. You know, we have families going to Nightingale, we have family going to those schools that you just described, who want to trust in them, who want to build on the support that they get from their teachers, and not to hear it denigrated in a meeting like this. So I would ask you not to do that.
Okay, I won't
but I do acknowledge, because I get casework all the time from parents about where things go wrong. And I do acknowledge that we have to improve and we have to support our schools to improve. And we have a school improvement service in place to do that. And I do really, really want to wrap around support around all the parents that are going to have to make this transition. And it's been frustrating really sort of seeing this unfold in a way that's kind of destabilized you all, that we can't get to the point to help you. And I have apologized to you for the letter that went out and immediately secured an extension. And I have apologized to you that you didn't get informed about that straight away, but I understand calls have gone out to you all.
Yes.
And I do want to sort of meet with you all as this progresses, you know, if the decision is made tonight, to make sure that transition is managed smoothly. And that the schools do not have the opportunity to turn you down if they have vacancies. I heard that loud and clear at every single school. Parents really worried that their children would not get accepted in another school. I've heard awful stories about parents with children with SEND getting turned down. Now, we have some influence, but ultimately there has to be sometimes some negotiation with schools. and a reminder with schools that these children deserve a place in our borough. And you know I'm working hard to try and increase places so that you have more choice. And it is frustrating that we don't have more choice, but we are trying to open new additional resource provision and to put in place the support that your children deserve. I'm so sorry that this has been such a hard process. Genuinely, you know, this is a really, really difficult situation.
Yeah.
But we do have good and outstanding schools. We do have staff in place to try and improve the education for children with SEND. It's absolutely my passion and my mission.
It's very hard, I understand that, but it's very hard when all of us, on all the SEND parents, do not, like, we don't have complaints about our school. That is the hardest thing. Like, that's all I'm gonna say. I don't, you
So
know.
the only option, if the school was to be considered as a sort of dedicated SEND provision, would still be to close it and to consider that as part of an asset review, because we would have to look at the school, look at any changes that need to be made to the school to make it suitable. And I think that would still put us in the same position of closure, unfortunately, that we're in.
We
If
actually
the
have a
school in its
question,
current
yeah.
form is unsustainable. So I think that would be a conversation for down the line under the asset review process if we reach that point.
Surely there can be some flexibility on that. Surely there has to be, because you can't provide places for our kids by doing this, but keeping the school open and creating the APR unit at the same time. If you can't be flexible on that, then everybody will be happy, and you will create the more places that you need in Hackney. I'm sorry, I'm speaking out of turn. I understand I shouldn't be, but like, you know, this is my kid. This is all our kids.
And we understand that. And when we're not here like robots. If you think any of us are sitting here feeling comfortable, then think again. It's the most awful situation we find ourselves in, and it's deeply frustrating because people sometimes don't think that we've got the heart of our children in the midst of this, and we absolutely do. We spent hours agonizing over this. You know, the length of this report doesn't show the commitment and the dedication or the hours that we have been back and forth. We get that it's hard. And if there's any other solutions, we'll absolutely find them. But in the absence of that, we have to accept where we are. So in terms of children with protected characteristics, as Councillor Woodley said, absolutely, we're going to do all that we can. You know, any transition is challenging for children. So those that have additional needs, we understand how you have to overlay that, you know, the extra walks you're going to have to do if they have to change their route, the change in routine, the routes, the books, the pictures that you'll have to take if they've got to walk a different way. You know, if the pattern, some children, if the patterns on the pavement is different, they don't want to step on it. I get all of that. And if I could do anything to change that for one child, I would. I'm pretty resourceful, but I cannot increase the birth rate to make sure enough children come to our schools so we have enough money for them to be sustainable. But what I can do is reassure you that every step of the way, we're going to be thoughtful, we're going to listen, we're going to try our best to make sure we're making the best decision at the right time for everyone, even sometimes if you as parents and carers don't think that we're doing the right thing. We are absolutely trying our best. Great. Corinne?
Well, yeah, sorry.
Corinne, would you like to take a moment and I take Julian? Would that help? Would you like me to take somebody else and give you a bit moment? Julian, if you come and then, do you want to just take a minute, Corinne? That's all right.
All right. Hi. Corinne, I'll take the question. Can everyone hear me? Yeah. Okay, so my question is this. Nowhere in the briefing report is there a cost-benefit analysis of closing Culverston. Could Acting Mayor Bramble or a delegated officer from Hackney Education give Cabinet members such an analysis, given that the costs associated with closing the school are upwards of 1 million on day one?
So I think you're going to be quite expensive to close the school anyway, right?
Yes.
Okay, I think,
What I'm saying as well is that we've never seen the cost benefit analysis of closing. We've never seen a report, and this is related to your earlier point. We've never seen any options aside from closing Culverston. That we had an initial dialogue that you were open to, but that got closed down. But anyway, I'm going to go back to the cost benefit analysis, and the cost of closing the school on day one is exceedingly high.
so I think, but the additional resource provision showed that sadly the school won't be financially viable. That yes, closing a school can be quite costly, but once that school is closed and that debt is absolved, it then doesn't accrue over years. And what the projections have shown with Culverston, and not, you know, we're talking about your school, but when we're thinking of all schools in scope, is over time, we're seeing that debt increase. And ultimately, the only thing that will save the schools at the moment is more children coming into the schools. And as I said, that's the one thing that we're not able to shift and change. And the other measures, so like the vertical year groups, what are the other thing? The financial support that you've worked alongside the bursars. Some schools have got rid of their teaching assistants, less after school clubs. A lot of the things that schools do, they've taken those measures. But doing those things hasn't been sustainable because unfortunately the projection of children coming to the school hasn't come into the system, into schools early enough. Have a follow-up?
Yes, I do have a follow-up. So, given that, I mean, this is based on given that academic standards and achievements remain high at Culverston, the proposal to close the school must be based upon financial gain outweighing pupil achievement and experience. Why is this benefit not evidenced here? Or for the strategy as a whole, given the huge costs vaguely described of closure?
So I did start by saying earlier on that the majority of Hackney schools are good or outstanding. That's 97%. Yes, your school sits within that. But those good results have not enabled children to come to the schools to make it financially viable. So yes, we can consider the academic achievement of the school, but we have to do that in the round. It's all about a school being sustainable. And unfortunately, it's not as if we've got lots of failing schools in Hackney that we could say we're going to focus on these failing schools because you want to focus on failing schools because actually you want to focus on the schools that have good education. Most of the schools are performing well, above the national average. But even despite having some of the best schools, not just in London, I would say in the world, well, in the country at least. I wouldn't say world class. I'm ambitious. I used to be a primary school teacher, so I'm always aspirational for Hackney education. What I would say is that even with your good results, the school is still finding it difficult to run day to day. So it has been considered in around good education, but it hasn't made enough difference to impact what the school needs to be financially viable and have a sustainable plan going forward. Yep. I get you're upset. It's fine.
Sorry, I do apologize. Well, actually, the question I'm going to ask now is, considering if the school is closing, and I'm talking on behalf of the SEN students, kids, what is the strategy that of support that you're going to provide in order to support the family? From obviously from the choices of the school, the families we've offered, to I would say to that child entering that school in September 24.
Yeah. So obviously you have parental choice when it gets to the point of making that decision, if we get to the point of making that decision, and we would try and support that. And when you go to that school, if they accept the child, then That's the end of it. If they don't accept the child and you think it's for unfair reasons, I think we would try and have a liaison on your behalf to see what the issue is. It might be that they don't feel they can meet the child's needs. We'd have to really challenge that if we felt they could and should. Alternatively, we would help you to find another setting. If we then had to extend again from that 31st of October deadline, we would do our best to do that to ensure we accommodate you. I find it very, very upsetting when I hear that schools have turned our children with send down. So, you know, my commitment to you is that we would support you through that process.
Sure. In your last email, you've actually told me that when I've sent you an email and explaining, obviously, it's about Eva's cases. Eva was out of school for 7 months 2 years ago, and I actually brought back Eva myself. So I know what it is to be out of school and working with school. And so when you emailed me back and you kindly said that you'll be providing support throughout this period, I haven't seen so far any support.
So the commitment was to ensure that we had a head of SEND come out to the follow-up meetings. I think when the officers returned to Culverston, a number of people were also here, sort of asking questions to Acting Mayor Bramble at that time. But our head of SEND was there and offered to hold workshops. And I think in the other schools this was taken up. I'm not sure if it was taken up in Culverston. But you know, they are very aware that I'm concerned that you need to have that opportunity to discuss options with them. So I have no problem going back to our head of SEND and trying to arrange that if you would like to engage in that workshop.
Thank you. So just, I think you've had your follow-up.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So just to overlay that, there is a special educational needs strategy. We're commissioning more SEND provision across the borough. There will be specialist staff working within schools, focusing on transition, speech and language, educational psychologists, all of that. If things go forward, will be put in place. Children will have, for example, personalised plans. So I gave the example, you know, for example, you may need a child that needs a picture of the route that they're going to travel every day, and you look at that over a period of time. Again, it's different for different children. All of those things will be taken into consideration if plans are taken forward. So I hope that reassures you. Can I take Hazel, who has the last question, please?
Sorry, I've just been trying to think how to condense my question when I wrote 12 pages this morning. Essentially, it's around the latest school vacancy statistics, which only came out last week, and so probably after the report was produced. But that does mean a number of the appendices in the report are not based on the latest information from schools. Overall, it shows that the vacancy rates are coming down. It also shows that they are significantly higher in faith schools than they are in community schools, 24% rather than 11% for just the community free and academy schools. So it's a massive difference. And it does show to me that the issue with the vacancies is primarily in the faith schools. And I know that that is not in scope at the moment, but it is a worry that if you want to address this, that is not yet being looked at. I guess my question is, I also looked at it specifically for each of the schools that are being proposed to close. What is the actual picture for their local area now, based on the latest data? You know, where could parents actually send their children if they wanted to apply for an in-year transfer? And it's really mixed. I looked at De Beauvoir and Culverston together because they are close enough that actually the catchment areas and the nearest 10 schools overlap a lot. And if you tried to move all of the De Beauvoir children and all of the Culverston children at the moment, there wouldn't be enough places in those 13 schools, particularly in year 3. Well, absolutely in year 3. And those 13 schools include 2 Islington schools, So you'd be making parents take them out of borough if that was going to be their choices. And it includes four, I think, faith schools, two of which have got a significant number of those vacancies. So again, you'll choose the community schools, the maintained schools have very few vacancies. You're making parents make some very, very difficult choices between nearby schools, faith schools, out of borough, or going much, much further afield. I just think you need to be more granular in your approach and to, you know, or why aren't you looking at these proposals more individually? The report always talks about all four proposals and reducing the vacancies across the borough. And I get that, you've got a problem, there's an issue in the whole system, but there are realities for each of the proposals that are different. Sorry, that wasn't much of a question in the end, sorry.
That was a lot, but
I know.
my experience as a school teacher will come in really handy there. So I'm going to try.
And I've sent it out today to everybody, but obviously the information only came out last week as well. So.
Okay, I'm going to actually take your mic off, and I'm going to try and come back on a few things. So you said something interesting about individual schools. We have 6 schools in scope, yes. But believe you me, we discuss every school individually, and we look at every school individually. It's after looking at those individual schools and considering the criteria of those individual schools, those schools then came into scope. So while the paper talks about 6 schools, we do think of schools individually. So it's not that we've just lumped schools together and that is it. And whether parents are here or not here, every individual school is just as important to us, and I have to stress that. I can't apologise for not having any favourites. Every school in scope is equally as important to all of us, and we want to get that right for every school. So we are looking at your school individually. Now, my understanding is that the data in the appendices H, I can't see officers shaking their head at me, so that's how long we've been looking at this report. It shows the figures. Now, if you've got figures that are working out differently, I'm happy for you to share that with me. But when officers have looked at our data, those are the accurate data. And you're right around free schools and faith schools that they do have low numbers. But if you remember, I said earlier on, unfortunately, I don't have those powers. I absolutely want them. I want every school in the borough that I have the scope to be able to say, right, we're all in scope, and this is what we're going to do across the borough. And that kind of granular, wider picture approach is limited because I don't have those powers. Officers don't have that powers. It's something that I'm lobbying government about. But in the interim, if they don't listen or I don't get those powers, I have to be responsible and work with the schools that are maintained, that are in scope. So I share that frustration, and that's why I've written to the Secretary of State twice about it. And as I said, with the figures, officers have looked at the figures and they say they're the most up-to-date figures. If you've got something to challenge that, absolutely send that in. I think in that same appendices H, it also maps where children can go to. There is enough places in all of our schools. I think the challenge is it may not be where you want to go or the distance you want to go. I hear that again. I'm very resourceful, but I can't change geography. This is not a place that we are of our own making, but we're absolutely taking responsibility to try and do our best to support all of these 6 schools through this transition. I hear all of those frustrations. Unfortunately, a lot of what you're talking about is not things that we are able to change as a local authority. Believe you me, if they were, we would have done it. And I'll continue to write to the Secretary of State, at the very least, even if they won't give us any more money, if they at least say, local authorities, if you have a school, no matter the status of the school, free school, academy, independent, it's in your area, you get to pull them in scope. We'll be having a different conversation. But because I can't, we have to have it around the maintained schools. Okay, I'm going to end the session here. I appreciate I didn't give you a follow-up, but I did allow you to have a very long question. And I hope that you feel heard. And if there's any information that you needed clarity on that you didn't get in the meeting, do come back to me on email, and I will respond to you as soon as I can. Councillor Garbutt.
Let me just ask a couple of questions. Thank you, Deputy Mayor Bramble. I really appreciate the time you've given to this item this evening. Just to make a couple of comments, I do welcome the change of language in the report that moves from merger to the close and secure places, because I know that's something we discussed back in May. You did just mention, so I've kind of got three questions. You did just mention that you took on some of the suggestions from the consultation, so I just wondered what some of those were, if you just give us a flavour of some of the things that were taken out of the consultation responses. I think what we've heard here this evening and what we all feel is kind of frustration with some of the way that the consultation has been handled. I feel that something we mentioned back in May was around the being informed early kind of sealed the fate of the schools due to the instability. The consultation structure and questions have kind of put the schools at scope in competition with each other. And I appreciate that you've mentioned some views from parents that you've received that haven't been able to be discussed in a kind of open forum. And also you just mentioned that you'd looked at a long list, and I think it would have been great to have brought people in earlier to that wider discussion, so the borough as a whole could have been involved in that kind of long to short listing. So I just wondered if you had any reflections on how the process had gone. So that's my second question. And then just in light of this, the decision this evening being to move to a formal consultation, we've seen a lot of engagement in the pre-consultation, but obviously no substantial changes to recommendations. So I just wondered how you're planning to make sure people feel able to and want to engage in the process and make sure that that's accessible to all schools and those that, so just acknowledging the varying response in the different schools to just make sure that everyone's able to contribute in the next phase. Thank you.
Well, Councillor Garbutt, I disagree that we're doing anything to make schools compete against each other. That isn't our culture, that isn't our philosophy, that's not what officers are here to do, and it's certainly not what we're to do as elected members. I repeat, we are not here of any doing of our own. No school is here through any fault of their own. So, no, please, no, Councillor Garbutt, with respect through the chair, Councillor Garbutt, you made your statement and now I'm responding. We are not here to compete schools one against another. I've always mentioned our family of schools. Even when I have campaigned strongly against false academisation, I've always said it's never about the individual school heads or the children, it's always about the structure. So I do not accept that we are making schools compete against one another. The situation is as it is. So in terms of bringing everybody along and involving anyone in the conversation, you've got to remember to first start this process, we did that with every individual school. We went, officers, myself and Councillor Woodley went to every individual school and started that conversation one-on-one with every school. Officers went back to those schools. I've had meetings with parents outside that. Officers have had meetings. We've responded to emails. We've had reports submitted. Reports have been included in this. So there has been lots of engagement even before we've gone out to formal consultation. My reflections on it so far, it's a really interesting dichotomy because some people will say, oh, it's been far too long. Other people said, oh, well, it hasn't been long enough. So if you're talking about a long list to bring people along, what you're saying is you think the period should have been longer. Well, that then contradicts what people are saying that it's too long a process. I don't think there's ever going to be a happy medium. It's a difficult situation. As I said, I'd rather us be in a situation where people are frustrated because they feel we've taken a bit longer. But I know that the first time the schools heard this news, they heard it from us and not in the paper, or not if the few that watch online hearing it come to cabinet. It was a deliberate decision to make sure that schools, parents, carers, teachers and heads heard that dialogue from us. So my reflections are, yes, it's been a painful scenario, but I still think we did the right thing to have those early conversations before we went out to a hard consultation. I'm now going to close this item. You're happy to stay for the rest of the meeting or to leave? That's entirely up to you. Gosh, yes, I've gone. Apologies, colleagues. I'm just conscious I ran over this item quite a little bit. So can I ask colleagues if they will move to the recommendation set out in the report to go to formal consultation? Great, thank you. So item 9 on the agenda is the capital update and property disposals and acquisition. I'm pleased to bring this report, and I want to acknowledge the investment the council has made in tech, building and other access to keep us up to business for the future. On that note, I'm going to hand over to Councillor Chapman to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. I absolutely echo your sentiments there and point out that even though the council does face a difficult financial position, we are continuing to invest in our services and making recommendations for capital investments set out in the report. You'll notice that the considerable investment we're asking for approval on in terms of ICT improvements, including, you'll appreciate after recent events, network connectivity. So there's there, but there are some really big improvements there. We're continuing to invest in our leisure facilities and parks, and there are proposals in here relating to a number of places, including Abbey Park, the London Hills Lido, and the reservoir. And we also asked for approval for a number of Section 106 investments in the public realm and digitalisation of library signage. So, send the report to Cabinet and ask for approval.
Thank you, Councillor Chapman. Any questions? Councillor Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Bramble. And just to kind of just build a little bit on Councillor Chapman's comments there, and just sort of noting the nearly £1.25 million worth of Section 106 money that is being invested into a range of projects which embrace libraries, they embrace street scene and some of our public open spaces, and an investment into those. But equally, it is just to place on record and point out, as mentioned in the report, that there is also funding to help finance a principal climate change and sustainability officer within the planning authority itself to meet the obligations that are falling into legislation, and all councils through their planning authorities will be required to deliver going forward. A very, very, very sharp focus indeed on ensuring that all planning applications as they come forward deliver on biodiversity net gain and reduce their impact on Hackney's environment, but also making a contribution to tackling the more wider issues around climate change. Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor Bramble.
Thank you. Any other contributions? Okay. Will members agree the recommendations as set out in the report?
Agreed.
Thank you. Item 10 on the agenda. This is the council's financial report, and this is a trying time in local government finances where local government has lost 60p in every pound. You would have just heard of Birmingham recently just been overtaken by Whitehall because of the financial constraints that are in, and want to commend Hackney's finance team to ensure that we've had good, strong fiscal responsibility. Not that we don't have difficult decisions to make, but actually we are not in that position because we've worked really hard under the leadership of Councillor Chapman and officers, and I just want to commend that. Councillor Chapman, can I hand over to you to introduce the report? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And as I've just alluded to, we remain in a difficult financial position, and I think it's worth saying that the council's finances are sound. We're not currently in the situation that some of the other councils in the country are facing, but we do face financial challenges as set out in the report. We have an overspend this year of around 9 million, which is obviously serious and needs to be addressed, and we need to continue to meet our commitment to have a balanced budget and sound financial management, in order that in the years to come, I'll still be able to say that we are in a sound financial position. But it's an issue that has to be addressed and is being addressed as set out in the report. As you'll see, the major part of the overspend, the number of reasons for it relates to accelerating social care costs, particularly in adults. And I'll refer back to the minutes of the Cabinet Procurement and Insourcing Committee we discussed earlier, where we set out that we'd now at the contract for the social care transformation work, which will is planned to make a major contribution to this issue over the years ahead. So I'd ask you to note that. The report also contains a recommendation about repaying an overpayment of business rates, which is a technical matter. It's beyond the delegated authority to the officers at this level. Yeah, I won't dwell on how someone got to pay 2 million or so over rates more than they owed, but obviously we have an obligation to repay it back, and I'll ask you to agree with that.
Again, thank you to Jackie and Councillor Chapman and all of the team. Jackie, if you can pass my regards to all of the financial team, Naeem and others as well. Can I ask colleagues, unless I can see anyone else indicating, can I ask Ollie's colleagues to agree the recommendation in the report as set out? Okay, moving on to item 11, City and Hackney Safeguarding Annual Report. This report sets out the vital work in keeping vulnerable adults safe. The council has its partner agencies and have made very important achievements, including the delivery of essential training, providing funding to the community organisation and improving accountability. The report also sets out the board's priorities for 2023 to 2024. Our safeguarding work continues to be something that is very important to us, and the council's duty to tackle abuse and neglect of all forms with an emphasis on prevention. We are committed that all of our residents should enjoy the right to be safe and to live in communities and do not tolerate abuse of any kind. I'll hand over to AD, who's online, if you wanted to say anything on the report.
Thank you, Chair. I just would like to thank you for your very positive words around the annual report from the Safeguarding Adults Board for City and Hackney, and to say this is part of our statutory duties to report to the Cabinet, and I'm pleased to present the report tonight for your overview. It shows the work that's done by partners across Hackney, because the board is both the contributions of the individual member partner agencies as well as the board work across as a partnership. We have met all our statutory duties in terms of the Safeguarding Adults reviews, and there continues to be a quite challenging programme of improvement and development, because Safeguarding Adults certainly has a long way to go, but I am confident year on year that we are making progress in this area, and I thank you for your time this evening in a very busy agenda to consider our report. Thank you.
Thank you. Do colleagues have any questions? No? Can we move to agree the recommendations as set out in the report? Thank you. So item 12 is the confirmation of Article 4 directives. This item sets out how the council will regulate the use of permitted development rights that currently allow common commercial buildings to be turned into housing without proper planning permission. Can I hand over to Deputy Mayor Nicholson to introduce the report? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Mayor Bramble. Deputy Mayor Bramble, this applies to approximately 10 wards in the borough, and it is focused on what planners identify within our local plan as priority industrial areas. And it is reversing the government's decision to enable permitted development rights to come forward, which means that in certain circumstances, developers would be permitted to change the use of a building without seeking any form of planning permission. And this, I think, as we have kind of spoken about previously in previous cabinet meetings, actually leads to quite a lot of challenges. Least of all that more often than not, such properties are converted to residential use without permission. They are exempt from providing any form of social housing whatsoever, and no contribution towards building genuinely affordable homes elsewhere in the borough, let alone within the development itself. And such unplanned conversions can lead to great pressures and strains on public services in all of their different shapes and forms. So to try and bring some sense and some order and direction to new development, this particular Article 4 direction focuses on those priority industrial areas, and it requires any developer to come forward to seek planning permission before that development is approved within those specific areas. The wider report identifies the geography of those areas that, as I say, in Hackney's great and illustrious past, there were many employment areas scattered across the borough. Large areas of the borough were given over to such employment opportunities. That is now not the case. The areas are quite limited, and they are very kind of dispersed around the 10 wards that are identified in the report. However, that doesn't make them not important. There are still people who are making things in our local economy, and these spaces are protected for them. So the report is set out, and I commend it. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Nicholson. Do colleagues have any questions? Can I ask that members agree to agree the recommendations as set out in the report? Agreed? Okay. Item 13 on the agenda, which is the business support programme grants funding. I'm going to hand back over to Deputy Mayor Nicholson.
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Mayor Bramble. Suffice it to say that this is authorising a grant payment, to all intents and purposes, to a commission, to a third-party organisation, of which they are identified in the exempt part of the agenda later on, if colleagues wish to go to that report in exempt session. This is to do with business support in the borough. It comes from a revenue resource called the Shared Prosperity Fund, which is the government's response to the fact that we no longer have the European Social Fund or the European Regional Development Fund investing into Hackney, as we have all left the European Union. So the United Kingdom is no longer entitled to those investment funds. To try and replace this loss, Her Majesty's government have brought forward the UK Shared Prosperity Fund. I have to say, Deputy Mayor Bramble, that this fund is pretty insignificant when compared to the levels of investment that were received in Hackney from the European Union under those two previous schemes. But nevertheless, the amount of money, small as it may be, is most welcome. And this money is authorising, this report is authorising the spending of this money to commission this third-party organisation to support our local businesses with a portfolio of various different objectives. There was a so the report is as set out, and I will wait for Councillor Cabot.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Nicholson. I also would say that this programme builds on the success of the recent 2.5 million programme that you've been leading on with officers to support Hackney businesses. And Hackney's diverse businesses are also part of what makes the borough quite great, and it's right to help them to thrive in a challenging economic climate. So thank you. Any comments or questions? Okay. Can members agree the report as set out? Apologies, thank you, Mark. So item 14 on the agenda, St Mary's School transfer of the 3 titles of London Diocese Board. Can I hand over to Councillor Chapman?
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Yes, the basically set out here, we are required under the School Standards and Framework Act 1998 to transfer this land, which is part of the site of St Mary's School already, in our ownership to the school. And the recommendations ask the Cabinet to endorse this.
Thank you. And just to say that St Mary's Schools, like all of our schools, plays an important role in our local school community and will continue to offer the same full support and partnership as we do to the rest of our diverse families of schools in the borough. Do colleagues have any comments or queries? Okay, can we agree to approve the recommendations as set out in the report? Okay. Item 15 is delegated powers for noting. Noted. Thank you. So item 16 to exclude the press and the public.
Do you require the exempt appendix?
Do colleagues require to discuss the exempt appendix? Is there anyone online? Any press or? Does anyone want to discuss the appendices? No? Okay. All right. So 18, any new business? I'm not going to take any AOBs because I'm determined to finish at 7 o'clock, but my prerogative as chair, but see me after if you're bursting to tell me something. Can I thank you all for your attendance tonight? Travel safe home and hope you have a restful evening. Good night.